Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to AVX Live. I'm Joe Gilderson, President of Corporate Audiovisual Services. Usually we would have our co-host Ryan Finch with us, but once again, Finch is off, doing another show production. I don't know what's keeping this guy so busy or if he's just neglecting his duties as a co-host. But either way, I think we're in safe hands today. Over the last few weeks, we've had conversations regarding the grand, the grand reopening of the events community and just how it's affected people. We've talked to hotels, we've talked to catering, and now we're going to talk a little bit more to production. Today's guest has direct experience and knowledge related to almost all of the areas of event and show production, both in person and virtual. And I'm sure he's going to have some great advice for everybody who's connected to the business. But before we get started, just a reminder to, keep active and go to our Corporate AV YouTube channel, subscribe to our LinkedIn, Facebook. We're going to be here every Wednesday, 1 o'clock. So, if you want, leave a comment, be a part of the show. We'll try to get everybody answered. And, we appreciate you watching. But either way, let's get started. I want to tell you a little bit about today's guest, Will Austen, who is actually the Corporate AV Operations Manager. So I know it's a little bit of a hometown hero for us, but still, I think it's a good person for everybody to get to know. So let me tell you a little bit about Will. He got his start in theater and actually holds a BFA in technical theater from Adelphi University. He began his career working as a technical director, working summer stock theater at the Gateway Playhouse in Long Island, where our usual summer production was 4 or 5 musical shows, and they each ran for a few weeks each. Really very cool. He continued working his early years in various regional theaters and opera companies, dance productions, and then even got into some rock and roll, including Diana Ross at Central Park. After theater and after some of the rock and roll stuff, Will got started working in corporate events. First at Staging Techniques as a technical director running the scenic operations. So he has a lot of carpentry and scenic background, which is really cool. And then he went to PLS Staging and was involved as account manager. So he's done everything on the account side and client development side. And then he went to Immediate Connections and was the branch manager for the New York office. All that before joining Corporate Audiovisual. So he's actually been involved in labor and staffing and operations from head to toe. And we are very happy to have him here today. So let's bring on our main guy here, Operations Director Will Austen.
Hey, Joe.
Hey, Will.
Good to see you here, and thanks for the warm introduction. I appreciate that. Looks like I had a pretty interesting career.
Yeah, did you even know it was that interesting?
Not till I saw this show. I'm not even sure where you got all those pictures. It must have been like trolling me on Facebook or something.
Well, I'm a little bit of a cyber stalker, but I needed some content. What are you going to do?
Well, that's a good place to find it, especially kids these days post anything and everything about themselves.
Well, this is true. I got to tell you, this particular picture was really interesting to me. Is that all steel, and is that a guy hanging from the steel up top?
Climbing steel, and that was actually a job out at Shea Stadium. It might have been, I can't even really remember what the act was, but basically companies like I was working for Mountain Productions at that time, and truckloads of steel parts would come, and then there'd be a full crew of people that would basically build it from the ground up, handing pipe hand over hand to assemble this thing. So basically you would be holding onto the steel with your legs, locking your feet around it, almost cross-legged around the pipe members, and handing pieces up. Eventually what would happen is there was a tower on either side of the stage, and then they would lift the roof section with some type of chain hoist or whatever. So it was very labor intensive. And back when I was young, that was pretty cool, climbing steel and doing stuff like that.
You want to get out there and do some now? I mean,
Not really.
we used to have
That's for the young kids.
I'm trying to remember what we used to build trusses out back, and then we'd have it. There was something about the truss challenge. I don't really remember what we used to call it, but you'd have to climb the truss, and there'd be a race. But I would imagine there's a lot of different safety rules now than when you were doing that gig out there at Shea Stadium.
Yeah, back in the early days of my career, safety was not really enforced in terms of people wearing harnesses like they all do now. OSHA came in and really, helped regulate the industry because people got hurt. And so, the last thing you want to see is your coworker doing something 30, 40, 50 feet up in the air, taking a tumble because they lost their footing or some of the steel is wet from the grass and the dew. So really safety is paramount. You don't want to see people getting hurt at all.
No, I think that's a good thing. And that's, that's usually, unfortunately, that's how change usually happens, is because there was something that, didn't go to plan. But I know that everyone thinks about safety first now. And, we talk about it all the time here, but I've seen it industry-wide. Everybody's paying attention to safety and what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But, you certainly have an interesting background. So
it certainly is pretty varied.
One of the stories you were telling me before, I think since we have so many outdoor gigs right now, I think it's kind of appropriate. But why don't you tell us, what were some of the challenges with the big Central Park Diana Ross concert that you did?
Well, that was pretty interesting because, again, it looked a lot like the picture that you showed the audience here. And you can see it's a steel structure that's being built outdoors. In the case of the Central Park show back in the early 80s, it was really a 2-day show. And during, I think, the first day, 4 o'clock, show's about to start. You could see the gray clouds rolling in from the distance with the thunder in the background. And, the wind is whipping. Diana Ross's hair is blowing in the wind. And next thing you know, she's saying, "Oh, it's okay." But there's lightning, and standing on a steel stage in a lightning storm is probably not advisable. So the production people that were running that operation paused the production, pulled everybody off the stage. The skies opened up. The rain started pouring. 20 minutes later, it dried out. Show went on without, any incident. But the talent really was sort of oblivious to where they were. I'm on a stage doing a show. You need competent production people behind the scenes that have some sense to make sure that, things happen safely. And safety is, always a big place that I'm going to come back to, because the last thing you want to see is anything bad happen, especially during the show.
Yeah, no, I think it's just appropriate because we have so many outdoor different activities going on. It is graduation season. There's a lot of groups in particular holding things outdoors as we're making our way through this opening. But every event seems to have a rain date attached to it right this second. So it seems appropriate, because somebody does have to make that decision and make that hard call. Once that thunder and lightning starts, that power button should be hit.
Yeah, pull the plug on that real quick.
But you mentioned competent production people. Speaking of competent production people, our friend George Buzzio is chiming in, and he says there's busy times ahead. So I'm going with George.
It really seems that suddenly we've gone from a world of virtual, where we were all sitting in boxes like this, to live events are starting to roar right back. It's been a crazy year, 14 months and counting, where things were shut down. I mean, Broadway closed. Who would ever think that a full industry and our industry of hotels and production would just stop and pull the plug on that stuff? And it's been a strange, interesting year, but good to see that things are finally starting to turn around.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. It looks like George remembers that show, by the way.
I don't know if I worked with George back then, but I'm sure maybe we bumped.
He might have been the competent production person who saved everybody. I mean, I'm sure he's done that more than once.
But
But
pretty crazy.
Well, look, we live in a small world in the production community. That's the reality. And at some point, everybody's kind of worked with each other, and but I just like the variety of different thoughts and different industries. Going from theater, rock and roll, and certainly the corporate side. But it's not even that. You've certainly done stuff in sound and video and scenic and technical direction. So I guess, how did you make the transition from one type of work to the other?
Well, I mean, going back to the beginning, I think it was first my love of theater. I mean, that's really where all of this started. My mom had some record collections in the house, and there was actually a few shows that were recorded onto a disc, albums. And it was specifically, I think it was Gilbert and Sullivan. And so, I started listening to this stuff, and my mom heard me playing these albums that she hadn't played in years, and realized that, I found this stuff interesting. And next thing you know, she's taking me to a show in the city, Pirates of Penzance or something like that. And just seeing the magic on the stage, and that suddenly you're watching ships sail across the stage, and people flying, and thunder and lightnings, all staged effects, obviously. And it was just really that the love of theater that brought me into the industry. So that really was my start. And after a number of years kicking around doing the freelance thing, which was mostly the first 4 or 5 years of my career, doing the rock and roll, kicking around to the dance productions, kicking around to opera and whatnot. I met a friend, or one of my friends in the industry said, hey, go over this place. They're looking for a technical person to run their operation. That was staging techniques. And that really was the beginning of the corporate side. So really it's always been about sort of that same type of, in theater, what you're always trying to do is create a place and a time and an event that brings the audience into the show. I mean, so like we did something at the Juilliard. It was Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. And they built this really incredible stage scenic thing that looked like a swamp in a house in Louisiana. I mean, you could see the moss. The lighting was designed to make it look like it was hot, this hot sunlight. And there was a sound effect going with the sounds of the swamp and the birds chirping. And so you walked into this icebox cold air-conditioned theater, and the second you sat down, you looked at the stage, and you were brought to this place that helped the story tell the story, because you looked at a place that fit the description and the people and the action. And on the corporate side, it's really the same thing. We're trying to create an atmosphere where our clients can communicate effectively with us, reinforcing or creating the scenic or the lighting or the mood to help them do what they do.
Interesting. Well, I guess that brings me to my question here. How did you go from this then to, let's say, going to this? How did all this variety of work prepare you for the 2020 pandemic and the big changes that unfolded there?
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, with all the various technology that I've used throughout my career, starting on the corporate side, originally it was slideshows. I mean, nobody was doing video or PowerPoint because it hadn't been built yet. It didn't exist. But the one thing that's always happened is technology has changed, keeps changing, and you have to be adaptable to the new technology of communication. So whether it's the transition from slides to PowerPoint, and video now being the thing, computers and video instead of slideshows and slides and photography, you have to be ready to kind of pivot. There's that word again.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I know. I had.
Are you thinking out of the box? I mean,
at least once, yeah. Well, now you got.
We're going to circle back. What are we doing?
Yeah. So in terms of the technology, with streaming, basically a year ago, we were told because of this pandemic that we cannot be near people. We cannot gather in the places that we did. So suddenly, Zoom became the new normal. And in terms of technology, we started having to do research to figure out what was going to be the way that would allow us to do events through Zoom or other means like this being in this box. So, how could we differentiate ourselves? How could we brand it? How could we make it, more interesting to the audience visually, more exciting? And basically, we started looking at various technologies, different platforms, different switching packages, including vMix, where I spent a number of months learning how to do that. So, in collaboration with other members of our teams, Ryan with the graphics, and me, working the software, learned how to make that happen.
Well, I mean, I think the change was actually really dramatic. I think you're downplaying it a little bit, to be honest. But, but the fact that you made that transition is really important. But how did you prepare? I guess the big question is how a lot of people in our industry they weren't able to make that transition, and certainly not right away.
Yeah.
And I think you kind of jumped on it. And you made that change really quickly. So why was that so important?
Well, I think it was important to our company's survival. I mean, if we couldn't figure out a way to bring in business and to keep business going somehow, if we couldn't do, load a truck and send gear out like we did and set things up and make events happen that way, we had to figure out, how can I sit next to Bill Gates like I'm doing in that picture there? Well,
I got to say, I'm a little curious. I don't remember that part showing up online.
Yeah, I don't think that actually was in the show, but it's amazing what you can do in post-production.
I was going to say, I was watching that program and I didn't remember that one scene, but it looks like it was, it went out to air. I mean, I don't know.
No, we didn't air that part. I don't think that our client would have been too happy with that.
I don't think they would have either. Okay. So we had some fun with post, I guess.
Yeah, a little post-production.
But the reality is, I mean, you've typically been in this position where you're, the wizard behind the curtain. And I think there's a lot of pieces that come together in order to make that a reality. And I mean, even just looking at the one image here of our friends at Blythedale Hospital. I mean, there's Zoom, there's vMix, there's a stream going out to several places, there's a website, there's graphics. It's just a lot different than building that steel.
Yeah.
Or being in that theater and building that scene you were talking about, like being in Louisiana. But you're right. It's still, you're creating the environment.
Well, it's creating the environment, but also, for me personally, it was technology. I've always had an interest in technology, whether I was actually involved with it or not. I mean, because obviously going from carpentry to running vMix is a little bit of a stretch. Because obviously there's no power tools that I'm using when I'm doing the vMix. But, I had an interest in learning, always had an interest in technology, whether it was ham radio, whether it was theater, the theater machine. You're constantly trying to, evolve new ways to make scenery move in and out. In the early days, it was men pulling ropes and fly systems. And now you have people running computers, pushing buttons to make those same actions happen. Evolving and learning the new technologies, whether it's a computer system to run video or back in the old days, run a light board, you have to adapt, you have to learn, you have to study. And with vMix, I applied myself. I spent a lot of hours watching every videotape that the manufacturer of that program made. Learn the program inside and out. In the case here, we're basically using multiple computers. Dane is running them over there on on Zoom to bring in multiple guests into vMix. So we're using technology, something called NDI, to bring in each of those screens as an input into vMix that we can then create and have 4 people sitting next to each other in a panel. And it was done through, utilizing computer networks, using this NDI. And again, basically studying and learning. YouTube University, as our friend Georgia said. Actually, in the case of vMix, it's watching going to vMix YouTube's channel, and they have a videotape on every subject of every control within that software. And I tell you, I spent a lot of hours learning that program inside and out to figure out how to make it work. Because usually, ultimately that's our job, is how do we allow our clients to effectively communicate? And, basically this is a tool. You use a tool to, build scenery, you use a tool to build a video show. How to use that tool. You learn how to use the tool and you apply yourself. Takes time and effort.
Yeah, no, I think you're right on point. I mean, our job is to not let technology get in the way, so to speak, right? We're supposed to use it as the tool to help them accomplish their goals. It's interesting. George has a really good point. It's hard to not see vMix or other programs similar, not seeing them be a part of our future events, and it is a good point, because we've already had this come up in several different projects. And do the hotels and the venues and the tents that we've been in, do they have internet that is powerful enough to go back and forth and do some of these things? And the reality is that what I'm hearing is nobody really knows the answer to that until you get there.
Yeah, and that's going to be the challenge, as it was the challenge when we went up to Poughkeepsie, one of our first hybrid jobs out of the box. And we basically, by putting NDI on their system, practically helped them crash their network somehow. The hotel people were able to get it back up and running in time for us to do the show, and we made it happen. But there were definitely technical challenges that we had to work through and find some workarounds on the spot to get us through that production. In terms of hybrid, I think, seeing that in our future, it's a real thing now. I mean, not only there might be still some people from the pandemic that don't want to travel, that don't want to come to a venue. Business companies all over the place are looking at remote work now as the new normal. They're not going to be bringing all their people back into their office. So that could also affect the event industry as well, where more and more people are bringing remote guests into a show or sending part of the show out to engage a remote audience, which actually is a good feature or a good thing to think about in terms of selling an event. You're now expanding your audience by creating a remote audience that you can bring this event to. So not only are you doing the in-person, now you can bring in a audience that might not have been there in other type of situations.
Yeah, and the other thing is, it's not just the audience. You can bring in. We spoke to a group this morning about a virtual event for September, and normally we would be producing that event in person for them in Central Park, this particular event, but it's going to be virtual. And the interesting thing is, one of their other events that they had done on the virtual side, they brought in a family from, I think one of the families was from Ohio, another one was from Texas, that they never would have been able to get to come to their gala. So they brought them in, remotely. And that's going to continue to be a factor, because it opens up the possibilities endlessly. But the question is, so on the technical side, how's everybody going to adapt to that? And you already saw that there are certain challenges when you're trying to use a program like vMix in a room with a live audience at the same time. So that's all got to be thought of ahead and mapped out.
Yeah, and really, the solution there that we've explored and will be the way to do this is basically you're creating two shows. You're creating an in-room show that's switched by, one person or one group of people with one setup of technology, and then you're creating a second package that is going to be your streamed production. So, that can sometimes increase costs, I would imagine, complexity, and it is something to be mindful of that, we're now doing two shows instead of one to make this actually happen.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent point. It's funny, as we've been talking, we thought the natural transition would be, okay, the doors are open, the venues are open, everybody's very precautious. We're going to transition into hybrid. And then, the in-person, what we've seen in the last, 3 weeks or so is that there's a dramatic push towards just being in person. And I guess what seems to be somewhat surprising is that the hybrid is thrown to the curb right this second. But let's look at the in-person for a minute. So as we're heading back to in-person, you got to put your operations hat back on for a second here, not your virtual vMix guy hat. But what do you think, as far as operationally, are going to be some of the first challenges that you're going to face?
I would have to say, and we started reaching out to people that had been, part of our team of people that we've always hired for in-person events a number of weeks ago. And there's some people that have basically dropped off the face of the map. So you're not going to necessarily have all the people that you thought you might have had 14 months ago. People have moved on to other careers, or maybe they decided that this is not the career for them. So really there's going to be some challenges there in terms of, finding people that are skilled, that know this business and industry. There's going to be training that has to be involved in terms of bringing new people up to speed. There's definitely a lot of challenges, and the same with, your labor for trucking, et cetera. You're basically, I think, going to find that labor is going to be a very limited resource, and it's going to be everybody's trying to grab those same people for the same job or the same day and time. That's always sort of happened in this industry, but I think it's just going to be a little more difficult at this time. I think in terms of gear, and this is, Tom Stimson talking, but there seems to be plenty of gear. Lots of places have stuff. That might be less of a challenge at this time, but definitely manpower is going to be the hardest part of things right now.
Yeah, and I've already heard some of that from different groups that really depend on trucking as well. So trucking is a real issue. A lot of truck drivers, remember, ended up at Amazon and FedEx and UPS during this time period because those companies were busy with everybody shipping things to their homes. So I see Buzz Talk Live that thinks that everybody's done with Zoom.
I mean, in some ways, I mean, I've heard there was some CEO that said he's sick of it, and that he's done. So, some people and some businesses might just decide, let's go hang out with people. I mean, let's, whatever is happening, we're going in that direction. But there are other companies that are risk averse and mindful about, making sure they're doing the right thing, not rushing people, because not everybody is going to be ready to walk out there. I mean, I still go to the supermarket and still put on that mask because I know really that's what's required right now. I know, I'm max vax. So, I've had my full course of vaccinations. So, I'm not personally worried right now for myself, but I think as a collective in worrying about other people, we don't want to be spreading around to people that are still vulnerable, that haven't gotten the shot for whatever reason. But the industry is really, we're starting to see venues are asking us, are your people vaccinated? You might be in a position with labor that you can't use certain people because of the restrictions that our clients and venues are putting on us.
Yeah, well, I mean, that certainly has come up, as each venue has kind of their own internal guidelines. They're trying to interpret and go by the state or the city that they're in. There is some flexibility, and it just depends on the group. I mean, they know their audiences, right? So some are going to be more cautious, some are going to be less. But I know that we were just asked for proof of vaccination for all of the staff working, and if not proof of vaccination, then a negative COVID test within the last 72 hours of them being on site. So how do you, any advice you'd offer to our part-time people and freelance and the entire community, to be honest?
Well, I mean, in terms of vaccinations, I mean, we're not doctors, we're not medical people. It's, we can't tell people, what to do or not to do. I mean, we can tell them what the rules will be, and that there will be restrictions. And if you're not, then, like I said before, if there's a client or a venue that says, if you don't pass X and Y and Z, then you're not getting in the door. So, that becomes an incentive, maybe you have to in order to be able to get the jobs that you want to be working in. So, it's a personal decision everybody's going to have to make. And obviously, you can't tell people medically, what to do or not to do. That's their own decisions. But, in terms of the reality of the businesses and work and employers, there's rules that we have to follow.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, I think we put the rules out there and then everybody makes their own decisions. But as we know that there's going to be, we're anticipating that some people have left the business, just like Buzz Talk Live has said, that there's going to be a lot of new faces going to be involved. And, it's going to be a learning experience probably for everyone, just like we were talking about vMix and hybrid and all these different types of, accessing audiences and presenters. There's going to be new people doing some of these functions as well.
Right.
And I do think that that's going to be a big part of it.
Mm-hmm. In terms of, young people that want to get experience if they haven't done this before, like in the case of audio, if you belong to a church, there's always, somebody in the back of the room that's pushing the buttons back there, mixing the audio in a church. I mean, that seems a lot of people have come from either church or they're a musician. They start plugging in instrument cables into amps and they say, wow, this is kind of cool, and we're mixing the mixer that's in the little venue at a bar. Figure out ways that you can get experience that maybe it doesn't pay. You volunteer your time to a community service or some venue or place that might be looking for that. And that's one way to get into the industry. Another way is take classes. There's various schools, audio engineering. Actually, I'm probably saying that wrong. The school in New York, AES.
We got a few. So,
yeah, there's definitely
Institute of Audio Recording, and then there's AES, and
exactly.
Towns, and there's a whole bunch of schools. So.
Or college courses, or in my case, I came out of the theater side of things. There are the people that go to film school and they want to learn. Yeah, Jim's got it right there for me.
Yeah, of course, we forgot our friends at SAE for a second.
Yeah, of course.
But they're back. They're back. We didn't forget you.
So really education, and obviously, typically during the summer, we do our own form of education here with Pirate University, where we do a couple weeks intensive hands-on training, including the Drape Challenge, to help people, get a feel for the various things. We bring in industry experts that are video people or lighting people to help people learn and give them some of the tools and knowledge that they would need to succeed working within audiovisual.
Well, I do have some inside information. I mean, we are looking at this year's Pirate University being a hybrid event, and odds are pretty good that we'll use Hopin as the platform to reach people on the online side. So coming soon, information coming soon. But I can guarantee that vMix and some of these other streaming technologies will be involved.
Yeah, will I be running the switcher on that one?
Yeah, you'll be on
Or
the other
teaching?
side of the camera this time, you know.
Yeah, put me backstage. I'm a little more happy back there.
Well, look, don't worry, we're almost done. We're going to get you off the hook soon. I guess just as we're thinking about some of these changes that are coming, I mean, how do you think our event logistics are going to be affected? You know, because of all the changes and adjustments everybody's had to make in the community. I mean, the hotels, half of them were closed for a year. I mean, I anticipate there's changes coming.
Yeah, I mean, and like we were touching on earlier in the conversation, with hybrid becoming more of a reality within venues, is their infrastructure, IT infrastructure, up to snuff when it comes to the needs that we're going to have in terms of making those types of things a reality. Site surveys, we're going to have to really be looking at more to get more information at every venue that we go to than we used to. I mean, before, you'd look around, okay, how big's the room? Do they have any AV in there? Can we, use what they have or bring in our own stuff? Now you need to know, okay, what's my up and down? Is there packet loss here? So really being more mindful of the technology challenges that have to be addressed for the hybrid type of events. Again, circling back to, finding skilled labor that is going to know these new technologies and have an understanding of vMix or the streaming switching software, and understanding, how to put in the proper encodes and encoder settings and whatnot. So there's definitely new knowledge that people need to acquire, gather, learn, to be able to to do this type of work. So that's really going to be the big challenges moving forward.
Yeah, I also think that there's going to be challenge, because I know that a lot of the hospitality industry is having staffing issues at this moment. I think that's going to affect us on room access times and setup times and strikes, and those turns,
Yep.
that are actually so crucial in the production world, because some of these things just take time to set up and test. And if you're running two events with that hybrid system, it just takes more time. It doesn't take less time.
Yeah, exactly. So it takes, more planning, more pre-production, more thought going into a job to make sure that, you're crossing all your T's, dotting your I's, and covering all the various things that we're going to have to address at each one of these events that we do.
Well, I think that's why everyone needs someone who has this type of experience, going from theater to, where are my pictures when I need them? Like, where was this guy? Where has this guy been hiding?
That was actually Croton Point Park, and I was actually helping out, volunteered that one. Chuck Barry doing doing a show over there a few years ago.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Definitely pretty cool. Well, I'm sure that we're going to have lots of other fun things that will come up soon. The fact that technology is always changing, just like you said, I think is what keeps us all moving forward. I think we just have to be ready to adapt. And so, this was great. Well, I appreciate all of your help. Any final words for anybody? Any final advice?
I mean, my final advice, if you want to work in this industry, is, find people that are doing this. I mean, really, we're a community of people that love what we do, want to share that knowledge with other people. I'm always learning things from new people that come in that have experiences that I didn't have. They're showing me ways of doing things that I never even thought of. And I think continuing to learn, it always helps us grow as a person and as a community that loves what we do.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a group that does love what they do, in the sense of, the audiovisual and theater and music communities. So, and a lot of people have come together on the social media side. Certainly, like with vMix and Zoom, and everybody's kind of worked together to help each other out. And, And that's pretty admirable. Everybody's
Mhm.
trying to get each other back in the game again.
Yeah,
So
whatever we can do to be working all the time.
yeah, well, it's a good thing for all of us. So everybody, make sure you can work. Let's start there. So get the proof that you need, so that we can give you
Yeah.
a call and then get you on the job.
Yep,
Um,
absolutely.
but either way, listen, thanks for your time today, Will. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to see you in the Realiverse pretty soon.
Yeah, probably in like a minute.
Yeah. Well,
I think
listen,
you're
thank you
just
for.
down the hall from me.
I think
That
I
way.
might be, yeah. But well, thank you again, Will, and let's keep up all that good work. Maybe you and Bill Gates will be hanging out later for a happy hour.
Yeah, I think me and Bill, we're buddies. We're
You
best
like that,
buddies.
right?
Yeah, exactly. Thanks again
All
for
right,
having me, Joe. I really appreciate it.
you got it, Will. Well, I mean, there's some pretty great experience and advice for everyone. Especially anybody who's just getting started out. It comes from finding something that you really like doing and have a passion for it, and then you get to explore all the different roads that go with that. Whether it's theater or photography, art, music. I mean, we just have such a wide variety of different creative minds and technology. That's what makes this so interesting. And our entire community is like that. So we appreciate everyone's time today. Let me just get back up here. I want to make sure everybody subscribes to Corporate AV, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook. We're coming back next Wednesday at 1 p.m. I might even bring that co-host back. I'm not even sure yet. Right? He's teetering on the edge right now. And hey, thank you to our friends over at Buzz Talk Live. These guys have doing great things. Check them out as well. George has got all sorts of things. He talks to some of the coolest people out there, in the creative world. But I think that's all we're going to do for today. So thank you, everyone. We will see you next week. And everybody be well. And we're out.